You're no longer needed. Get out of the house. I ended up hospitalized due to threatened premature labor and overwork. My husband Nate and mother-in-law had always been merciless in pushing household chores onto me, even while I was pregnant. And when I went on maternity leave, my sister-in-law joined them in making my life even more burdensome, saying I wasn't working anymore, so I should do more. Unable to refuse, I continued doing what I could: grocery shopping, cooking, laundry, and cleaning, despite my heavy belly. However, pushing myself too hard finally resulted in emergency hospitalization. They didn't even come to visit me in the hospital, but as my discharge date approached, suddenly all three of them appeared. I thought it would be my husband, mother-in-law, and sister-in-law, but the third person wasn't my sister-in-law, it was an unfamiliar woman. Her belly was swollen, she was clearly pregnant. "You look fine. Wasn't the hospitalization a bit dramatic?" "Who is this person?" "My new wife," Nate said with a triumphant look on his face. Then he pulled divorce papers from his bag and thrust them at me. "Fill these out," he said roughly, slamming the papers on the table and forcing a pen into my hand. "I don't need you anymore. Don't come back after you're discharged. Get out of the house." Behind Nate, his mother and the woman were snickering. My fists trembled with rage at his outrageous behavior. Just then, my father, who had been helping with my discharge procedures, returned. "It's been a while," my father smiled in greeting. Both my mother-in-law and Nate returned his greeting with unpleasant smirks. "Thank you for taking care of my daughter. Seems like you heard our conversation. Really, your parenting must have been lacking. We have no place for Sharon anymore, so please take care of her at your home." My mother-in-law and husband laughed mockingly. However, my father's next words stopped their laughter dead. "No, no. The ones leaving that house won't be Sharon. It'll be you all. My name is Sharon. I'm a 30-year-old nurse. I've been married to Nate for 3 years. I met Nate at a party that I reluctantly attended at a friend's invitation. Being shy, I wasn't particularly interested in talking to strange men. While watching my friend actively engaging with male participants, I was focused on enjoying the hors d'oeuvres to get my money's worth from the participation fee, not really talking to anyone. That's when I made eye contact with a man who seemed equally uncomfortable helping himself to the hors d'oeuvres. That was Nate. When our eyes met, he looked down awkwardly, but then, as if making up his mind, raised his head and looked straight into my eyes. "Are you here because of a friend too?" "Yes, I am." "Me too. I'm not really comfortable at places like this. How about we keep each other company, since we're both here against our will?" Nate's shy smile made him easy to talk to, and I ended up spending most of the 2-hour party chatting and eating with him. The time we spent talking in the corner of the venue with hors d'oeuvres in hand turned out to be really enjoyable. Although I hadn't been keen on coming at first, as I talked with Nate, I started thinking that maybe it was worth coming after all, since I got to meet him. At the end of the party, participants wrote down the names of people they liked and gave them to the organizer. If both parties wrote each other's names, they could exchange contact information as a successful match. Since I hadn't talked to any other men and had a good impression of Nate's gentle way of speaking, I wrote down his name without hesitation. Apparently, Nate had the same idea. We left the party venue as a matched couple. After exchanging contact information, things progressed quickly to dating and marriage. After getting married, we lived together in an apartment in New York, but when Nate's father passed away last year, we moved in with his family. In that spacious house where Nate once lived with his family, we lived with his mother Eleanor and his sister Wendy, 4 people in total. After living together, I noticed that Nate, who was 11 years older than his college student sister Wendy, was somewhat of a sister complex, frequently buying her clothes and bags. I suppose with such an age gap, she must be precious to him beyond measure. His sister was also very attached to her brother Nate, and they would often go shopping together on holidays. They seemed to have the closest sibling relationship I'd ever seen. Although I was worried at first about how things would work out, both my mother-in-law and sister-in-law treated me like real family, so I felt completely at ease living there. One day, I noticed I hadn't had my period for over a month, so I visited an OB/GYN. The tests revealed I was pregnant. When I got home and told the family, not just my husband but my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were as excited as if it were their own news. "Oh, how wonderful!" My mother-in-law said this while crying and holding my hands. Seeing her like that made me emotional too, and I hugged her while we both cried. When my sister-in-law found out about my pregnancy, she had already been helping with dinner preparation, but that day she insisted on doing it all herself. "Wendy, I'll help." No, just sit down, you're pregnant." "I'll make my brother help too. I want Sharon to have a healthy baby." Both my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were very concerned about my health and took great care of me. I realized again that I had become part of such a wonderful family, and it warmed my heart. However, this warm family would soon fall apart. About 6 months after learning of my pregnancy. During a checkup ultrasound, we finally learned the baby's gender. It was a girl. I clutched the ultrasound photo, practically skipping home in excitement. I waited for my husband to come home, wanting to announce the gender when everyone was present. Actually, we found out the baby's gender at today's checkup. It's been about 6 months, hasn't it? Tell us. Come on, don't keep us in suspense. Everyone was looking at me with excited eyes. Imagining them crying with joy when they heard the gender, I couldn't help but smile. I placed the ultrasound photo in the middle of the table and, looking at it, said, "We're having a little girl." The room fell silent. Maybe they're too moved to speak? That's what I thought, but when I looked up and saw their expressions, I realized that wasn't it. They all had disappointed looks on their faces as they stared at the ultrasound photo. Their reaction was so different from what I had expected that I couldn't hide my confusion. For a while, no one said anything, just staring at the ultrasound photo, but my husband finally broke the silence. "This is terrible, it's not a boy." "What? What do you mean terrible?" "Well, obviously, it needs to be a boy first." "That's right, how troublesome. To think it would be a girl." My mother-in-law agreed with my husband. "I can't believe it. I've been giving up my own time to help with housework." I couldn't understand what the three of them were saying. I never imagined the people I thought would be happy would show such obvious disappointment. Just because the baby was a girl. What does it matter if it's a boy or a girl? Of course it matters. "I'm so disappointed in you," my mother-in-law said, sighing dramatically. "Wendy helped with housework because we thought you'd have a boy." Poor Wendy. To think you'd turn out to be such a failure. I feel deceived. Yes, I'm really disappointed in you. From that day on, I lost my place in this family. Really, Sharon is so useless, isn't she? Mom, this is what you call a failure, right? That's right. Wendy, you must never become like her. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law started bad-mouthing me to my face at every opportunity. Nothing about me had changed. I was living just as before, going to work, coming home to do housework. Yet my mother-in-law and sister-in-law had completely changed and started verbally abusing me. Even the dinner they used to eat with pleasure now drew criticism. What is this? It has no flavor at all. I've been putting up with it, but Sharon, you really are a terrible cook. I'm sorry. I could only bite my lip and apologize. Nate, watching me being scorned every day, did nothing to help. In fact, he joined in. Nate would invite colleagues and friends to our house and constantly complain about me. Really, my wife is so incompetent. Try this food, it's awful, right? Stop it. You shouldn't serve such terrible food to guests. Nate, I wonder why you married such a wife. They all started talking about what an incompetent wife I was. The guests all looked uncomfortable, but the three of them were too busy bad-mouthing me to notice. From the day they learned the baby was a girl, I was scorned and had my character denied daily. I was struggling mentally, but the baby kept growing. When I went on maternity leave, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law stopped doing any housework at all. Since you're not working, you need to properly take care of the house. I would wake up earlier than anyone else, make lunches for Nate and his sister, and prepare breakfast for everyone. During the day, I would thoroughly clean every room in the large house while my mother-in-law lazed around watching TV, or make snacks for the neighborhood ladies she invited over. In the afternoon, I would finish shopping alone before Nate and his sister came home, and prepare dinner. I would finish eating before everyone else, prepare the bath, and then until bedtime, do the dishes, fold everyone's laundry, the same routine every day. Even Nate, who supposedly married me because he loved me, never helped and treated me like nothing more than a housekeeper. I was tired of these days. Honestly, I considered divorce. But being pregnant made it hard to take that step. I worried about making my child fatherless due to my circumstances, potentially giving them a difficult life from birth. Such anxieties crossed my mind. I just had to endure it myself. Eventually, I killed my emotions and just lived through each passing day. The day before my sister-in-law's birthday, she announced at dinner, "I want to invite my friends over for my birthday party." Of course, my mother-in-law and Nate agreed. Then my sister-in-law looked at me and said, "Sharon, you'll handle the preparations, right?" Me? I couldn't help but frown. Seeing this, my mother-in-law scolded me. "Don't you even want to celebrate your husband's sister?" "No, that's not what Wendy is busy with college." "You're not working, so you have free time, right?" "That's right. Just do it." They must not have noticed how big my belly had gotten. Even though the baby was clearly moving now. Surely, no one knew. On the day of the party, they all left me behind to go buy birthday presents for my sister-in-law. It was a party my sister-in-law had suddenly announced. Nothing was prepared, not the decorations, not the food, not the cake. Of course, my sister-in-law hadn't prepared anything either, just telling me what she needed. I had no choice but to go shopping. As I was preparing to go with my heavy body, I suddenly felt severe abdominal pain. The pain was so intense I couldn't stand, and I couldn't stop sweating. I immediately contacted my regular OBGYN, who told me to come in right away as it might be threatened premature labor, so I called a taxi. The severe pain showed no signs of subsiding, and I felt anxious. What if something was wrong with the baby? When I arrived at the clinic and was examined by the doctor, the baby was fine, but I was ordered to be hospitalized immediately. I knew I had to contact Nate about this. I tapped his name in my phone's call history. After several rings, a slightly irritated Nate answered. What is it? Have you finished the party preparations? Well, I had severe abdominal pain and came to the OBGYN, and they're making me stay for emergency hospitalization. What? So you haven't finished the preparations? Well, no, I couldn't under the circumstances. Don't mess around. You should have finished the preparations before going. We're already heading home with Wendy's friends. Nate scolded me for not finishing his sister's birthday party preparations. But I was at risk of premature labor and the baby was in danger. I had no choice. The party is more important than the baby right now. I couldn't believe my ears. I knew about Nate's excessive doting on his sister. But now, this person had weighed his sister's birthday party against our baby's life. And he decided the birthday party was more important. I couldn't believe it. I'm done. Nate was still yelling something, but I hung up on him. The baby was mine and Nate's child, yet I couldn't stop crying at the unbelievable words Nate had spoken. In this family now, there was no one on my side, no one to help me. The only people I could rely on were my own parents. Hello, Dad? I called my father in tears. After that, I ended up hospitalized for 2 weeks due to threatened premature labor and overwork. The only visitors I had were my parents, and perhaps unsurprisingly, Nate and his family didn't come to see me for a while. My mother-in-law and Nate came when about 3 weeks had passed since my hospitalization, just as I was finally able to be discharged, though later than planned. I was speechless when they entered my hospital room. 3 people came into the room. My mother-in-law and Nate. And instead of his sister, there was an unfamiliar woman. The woman's belly was swollen, she was clearly pregnant. You look fine. Wasn't the hospitalization a bit dramatic? Who is this person? My new wife, Nate said with a triumphant look on his face. Then, he pulled divorce papers from his bag and thrust them at me. Fill these out, he said roughly, slamming the papers on the table and forcing a pen into my hand. I don't need you anymore. Don't come back after you're discharged. Get out of the house. Behind Nate, his mother and the woman were snickering. My fists trembled with rage at his outrageous behavior. Just then, my father, who had been helping with my discharge procedures, returned. It's been a while, Eleanor, Nate. My father smiled in greeting, and both my mother-in-law and Nate returned unpleasant smirks. Thank you for taking care of my daughter. Seems you heard our conversation. Really, your education must have been lacking. We have no place for Sharon anymore, so please take care of her at your home. My mother-in-law and Nate laughed mockingly. However, my father's next words stopped their laughter dead. No, no. The ones leaving that house won't be Sharon. It'll be you all. What does he mean? What is my father saying? I wasn't the only one wondering this, as Nate mockingly said to my father. What nonsense are you talking about? As expected of Sharon's father. Despite Nate's rude tone, my father continued speaking in an extremely calm voice. Did you know your late father had substantial debts? At my father's words, my mother-in-law visibly reacted. Nate seemed to know nothing about this and asked his mother. Is that true, Mom? Yes, there were debts. But they should have been paid off. That's why I never told Nate or Wendy. Nate looked relieved hearing his mother's words and gave my father and me a knowing look. But my father continued. To repay those substantial debts, your late father borrowed money from me using your house as collateral. What? According to my father, because my father-in-law had passed away, their house now belonged to my father instead of the debt. Neither Nate nor his mother had known this, and they were visibly shaken. Since Sharon was living in that house, I had no intention of forcibly collecting it. However, if you're divorcing, that's a different story. My father maintained his smile, but I could feel his anger even from behind. So the ones leaving that house won't be Sharon. It will be you all, who will become strangers to Sharon. They were stunned for a while, but once they finally grasped my father's words, they began to panic. My father calmly told them to leave immediately as they panicked. Then Nate looked at me and snatched back the divorce papers. I'm sorry I couldn't be there when you were going through difficult times. I'll support you from now on. It was an obvious, desperate lie. Had this person always been so pathetic? I was speechless at his complete turnaround, but my father tapped Nate's shoulder. Nate, you know what these are? My father held up several photos in front of Nate's face. Sorry, but I've had evidence of your affair for a while now. Of course, I'll be demanding compensation, so be prepared for that. My father said this with a smile, then took my belongings and led me out of the hospital room. I could hear my mother-in-law and Nate making a commotion, but neither my father nor I looked back. 2 years have passed since then. The baby was born safely, and I now live with my parents who help me. First-time parenting, I didn't have a husband to rely on, but I had even stronger allies in my parents. With my reliable mother, my father who was smitten with his first grandchild, and my precious child, we lived peacefully as a family of 4. Then one day, Nate and his family showed up at my place. I had no intention of letting them into the house, but they were causing a scene, shouting without regard for the neighbors, so I reluctantly let them into the entryway. Why are you here? What happened to that new wife? Well, that woman's baby wasn't mine. According to Nate's story, his mistress had given birth to a boy, but DNA testing revealed there was no parent-child relationship between the child and Nate. When they discovered they had been deceived, they kicked out the mistress. That's when I heard you had a boy. Nate had 2 mutual friends at his company, and he had apparently rushed over to confirm after accidentally overhearing them talking. Yes. As Nate said, the ultrasound had been misinterpreted. The baby I gave birth to was actually a boy. You were deceiving us. I thought it was a girl too, until he was born. That child is mine too. That's right, it's Nate's child. Hand him over. They were about to barge into our house, demanding to know where the child was. Sharon, what's all this commotion? Concerned about the noise, a man appeared from inside. The one who came to check on the situation at the entrance was my fiancé. When Nate and his mother saw my fiancé, they were dumbfounded by this sudden development, but once they grasped the situation, they became furious. Sharon. You were having an affair. What kind of woman are you? Unbelievable. Had these people forgotten what they themselves had done? I was astounded by how enraged they were, acting nothing like the husband who had cheated and his mother. As I was wondering how to get rid of these troublemakers, my fiancé started laughing. I met her after the child was born. My fiancé looked straight at Nate and his family as he spoke. Besides, I heard you were the one who had an affair. What right do you have to speak? Should I call the police? Nate and his mother couldn't respond to my fiancé's sharp words and left, muttering complaints under their breath. You're quite assertive. I thought you were more of a pacifist. How could I forgive someone who treated you so terribly? Those words nearly made me cry. Besides, we wouldn't want to disturb the little one's nap time, right? Once again, I realized what a wonderful person I had met. 4 more years have passed. Mommy. Hurry up. Just a minute. Take it easy, Sharon. I've got him. Our son, still wearing his big backpack, runs ahead with excitement in his heart. My fiancé, who watches his back lovingly, became my husband when our son turned 3. Today is our son's first day of school. As I held back tears watching our son sitting quietly in his chair listening to the teacher, someone suddenly tapped my shoulder. When I turned around, it was Nate's former colleague. He was one of the people who had come to our house back then and heard endless complaints about me. I was speechless, but he said, "Could you spare some time after this?" I suspected it was about Nate. When I consulted my husband, he said it might be good to hear it out to put the past behind me completely. In the end, my husband took our son home, and I went to a nearby cafe with Nate's colleague. He told me what had happened to Nate afterward. After that, although his sister graduated from college, she hadn't taken job hunting seriously and ended up unemployed. As a result, both his mother and sister were financially dependent on Nate. Although they managed to get by at first, between supporting them and paying the settlement money, Nate's income alone eventually wasn't enough. The colleague hadn't heard directly from Nate, but apparently, he had taken on debt due to financial difficulties. Recently, Nate had been missing work without notice, and when staff went to check on him at home, they saw him being taken away by scary-looking men. Since then, no one knows where Nate is. Nate's colleague finished his iced coffee. I felt deeply grateful that I had divorced him back then. I might even need to thank Nate for bringing his mistress and preparing divorce papers. I'm home. Welcome back, Mommy. Welcome home, Sharon. Surrounded by my adorable son, gentle husband, and reliable parents, I'm savoring my happiness now.